All right, so welcome again, everybody. And today we have an incredible presenter, an incredible person, a professional, Dr. Erica McClure. So she's a professor in the Department of Special Education, Early Childhood, and Prevention Science at the University of Louisville, Kentucky, which is in the USA. So welcome, Dr. Erica. So the mic is yours. So there you go.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. I want to start off by saying, first off, I'm very grateful to be here and I'm happy to establish this collaborative relationship. I just want to say from the beginning that a couple of things that please consider me a resource. I'm going to share my contact information with you. So if you have any additional questions, any additional resources that you would like, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to provide them and answer any questions. Another thing is I know that it is a very difficult time in your country right now, and I can only imagine. I'm very grateful for all that you are doing for students. And so again, I am happy to support you in any way that I can. So any questions that you have about any of the topics I'm going to discuss today or any that I discussed last week in the video, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or help in any way that I can. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a moment.
Absolutely nice, yeah.
Let's see. Okay. Here we go. Sorry, it was not wanting to cooperate for just a moment, but I should be good now.
It's great, yeah, that's fine, don't worry.
Okay, thank you. Oh. Actually, I'm going to try that a different way. It's always wonderful when we get to wait a little bit on technology.
Yeah,
Nothing else.
And by the way, it's like I've recently stumbled upon a meme on the internet, like when the presenter starts to demonstrate the screen, so his or her speech is like slowing down. So let me share my screen. And yeah, that's how it works. That's our psychology. Yeah, we can see our screen right now.
Completely true. And that's very, very funny. I've never thought about that before, but that is exactly what happens. Our mind starts to have to focus on other things.
Yeah, that's right.
So, again, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to discuss all of this with you. Today, I was asked to focus primarily on teaching students with ADHD and ASD. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. Or maybe I'm going to dive right in.
Looks like I'm not sure, but I cannot see the presentation, so it looks like it disappeared. I don't know if it's just me.
Okay. Yeah, it's I'm getting a message that Zoom crashed. Hold on just a moment. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. No worries at all. Like we have like 2 hours, so
yeah.
It's just but...
Let me see. Okay. Yeah, I've had this issue before where I have too many tasks open. So I'm going to try closing a few things on my computer and seeing if that helps.
Happens. No problem at all.
Okay. Give me just a moment.
If I can be of any assistance, just let me know. Maybe like I don't know.
What I may do is actually, if this happens a second time, I may email you the presentation and then have you shared on your screen, but hopefully it will not happen. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Okay,
no worries at all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's try this again. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, I was gonna say if it doesn't like me presenting it, what I can do is also just kind of go through it slide by slide. So hopefully it looks like it's going to work this time, which is greatly appreciated. All right, so here we go. All right.
Nope, sorry, it disappeared again. Sorry. Yeah, it just disappeared again.
Okay, let's try this. I'm just going to share it and I'm going to go through it slide by slide rather than trying to present it. Okay. Okay, hold on.
Or maybe you shouldn't start the presentation, just like displayed from the program, not the presenting mode. just
Yeah.
kind of the preview mode. Maybe
Right. I
that's
think,
not gonna crash.
right. I think it doesn't. Let's see. Okay. Can you see it?
Not yet, not sure.
Yeah. It's saying it's failing. Ugh, this is very silly. I don't have Zoom doesn't do this for me often. I am really sorry, everyone. I'm going to try leaving and rejoining and
No
seeing if that
problem at all.
helps.
Yeah, yeah,
Great.
we're waiting for you, so no
Okay.
problems.
Thank you.
Yeah, so they're all while we're getting ready with the presentation. So make sure you do some notes. So later, after Erica's presentation, you can ask her questions. So we're really happy to get to know that we can contact her after the after the course. So anytime you need, anytime you have any questions, and you may have that incredible opportunity to communicate and cooperate. Okay, again.
Okay. I think if you add me as yeah, I think because I left, I get to get.
Yeah, it should work now. I made you co-host.
Okay. This is my last attempt before emailing it to you.
All right, cool.
Fingers
So
crossed.
we got it on the screen.
Okay,
So
great. So a lot of what I'm probably going to share about these students may be very familiar to you, especially if you have a lot of experience working with these students with these disabilities, but some of it may not be familiar. Just so you know, girls actually tend to be less frequently identified as having ADHD, because usually when we think about students with ADHD, we tend to focus on the hyperactivity. And so again, females tend to go under diagnosed. Typically, it's really until adulthood before a lot of females are diagnosed with ADHD, because there's more distractibility, that type of ADHD in females, and also they tend to be more talkative. So instead of the actual physical hyperactivity, just so you know, that is that gender difference there a lot of times. But in general, students with ADHD have that inability or difficulty paying attention, difficulty with sitting still, and or difficulty controlling impulses. And so a lot of times that can look like blurting out or interrupting people, again, being very talkative, or even asking off-topic questions or making random comments. So you might ask the students a math or reading comprehension question, and then a student may respond with, what's your favorite color? Or did you see that it's raining outside now? Is it completely off topic comment or question? And again, a lot of times that interrupting behavior is a result of that inability to focus as well as impulsivity. A lot of times students with ADHD will also delay beginning a task. So time management is very difficult for some students with ADHD. They may only work on a task for a brief period of time before moving on to something else. And as a result, they only may complete part of a task and before completely abandoning it. My child has actually been diagnosed with ADHD, and she has these huge projects that she gets very, very focused on, and she'll work on that project and put a lot of time in it, for maybe a week, very, very focused. And then all of a sudden she's on to something else, and the project stays there completely abandoned for a long period of time. She never actually comes back to it. And again, that's very common with students with ADHD. That distractibility component that especially tends to manifest in females, but again is also present in males as well, is staring off randomly, having difficulty shifting focus, or even seeming to ignore verbal directions. So I think this is something that I think a lot of people don't associate with ADHD, is a hyper focus. So it's not just that individuals are distracted at times easily, but they really have a hard time even shifting their focus. And so even with vocal verbal prompts, if an individual is hyper focused in on something, it's very difficult for them to shift suddenly to something else. Now, another thing that's very important to note is that other mental health concerns can cause classroom issues that can look a lot like ADHD. So, for example, a child who can't focus might actually be distracted by anxiety or something that is upsetting them at home, or maybe worried about being bullied by peers. So anxiety can sometimes look a lot like ADHD. A child with a learning disorder like dyslexia might act out because they're frustrated with their schoolwork. So again, you might have hyperactivity or moving around the classroom that's really just trying to avoid that schoolwork because it's difficult. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it's also important to note that girls with ADHD are more likely than boys to have only the inattentive symptoms. So sometimes what looks like someone who's just kind of dreamy or likes to daydream and they're just staring off into the distance, we might not recognize that as a symptom or a manifestation of ADHD when it actually is. So that's why, again, I think a lot of times with ADHD, people focus on the hyperactivity, but it's that distractibility and difficulty focusing or shifting focus that is also a very important component of ADHD. So if you learned anything about me last week, you know that I love talking about the brain and how all of this manifests in the brain. I think it's really helpful to understand this because it tells us a lot about students with ADHD, how their brain functions, and how that impacts their ability to maintain focus and complete sustained work. So ADHD brains have lower levels of a neurotransmitter called norepinephrine, and norepinephrine is actually linked very closely with dopamine. And if you know what dopamine is, that actually helps control our brain's reward and pleasure center. So a lot of times, if you engage in an activity that you find rewarding, or even specific, again, like things like exercise can sometimes release dopamine, and that we find that rewarding, right? We recognize that whatever activity we do that releases dopamine is actually pleasing for us. So because of that lower level of dopamine, individuals with ADHD are often not able to access that same level of natural pleasure or reward for engaging in activities that other people can access just as easily. So for some people, just completing a task is very rewarding. But for individuals with ADHD, they often have to seek outside stimulation or external rewards because their brain has that lower level of norepinephrine, which actually reduces their ability to experience intrinsic rewards or benefits from doing something. And again, I'm so grateful that the science realized this, because typically in the past, people with ADHD were regarded as being lazy or ditzy, or you just needed to sit down and focus. But actually their brains don't reward them for that. Their brains are looking for outside stimulation. So a lot of the medications that are now prescribed for ADHD actually help supply or stimulate release of dopamine in order to encourage individuals to be able to contact that sort of intrinsic value in just completing activities. Now, on top of all of that, also, the ADHD brain has impaired activity in 4 functional regions of the brain. And if you know anything about what these regions of the brain do, it will start to make a lot of sense how ADHD manifests the way that it does in a lot of students. So it impairs the frontal cortex, which controls high-level functions like attention, executive functioning, and organization. So executive functioning is really that ability to keep your working memory going, also able to connect different parts of the brain and to manage time. A lot of that is in that frontal cortex. The frontal cortex also, I don't know if you've ever heard it referred to this way, but it's also kind of like a filter. It tends to limit our impulsivity. So a lot of people that have damage to that front part of their brain, that frontal cortex, really struggle with impulsivity, because that frontal cortex usually, again, acts like a filter. And so the fact that ADHD brains have that impaired activity in that part of the brain, that contributes again to that impulsive behavior. There's also impaired activity in the limbic system, and this region is actually located deeper in the brain, and it helps regulate our emotions and our attention. So again, that's why some students with ADHD may have difficulty regulating their emotions, and will also struggle with attention. And then there's the basal ganglia. A deficiency in there can actually cause inner brain communication and information to short circuit. So that's why if an individual may have something stored in their long-term memory in one part of their brain and actually have difficulty recalling it when needed, and that's again can be related to that short circuiting in parts of the brain, and that can also result in inattention or impulsivity. And also, there is impaired activity in the reticular activating system, and that's the major relay system along many pathways that enter and leave the brain. And again, a deficiency in that part of the brain can cause inattention, impulsivity, or even hyperactivity. So the reason I like to go through all these things is the same reason why I wanted to talk about the way trauma impacts the brain, because a lot of times when we're working with students, it's easy to think of the behaviors in which they're engaging in as a choice, which sometimes they are. But a lot of these individuals actually have their internal functioning has been impacted significantly by either their exposure to trauma or their genetics, in this case with ADHD. So I think it's important for us to recognize that while we may see hyperactivity and impulsivity and interrupting other people and not being able to focus as a choice someone is making, if someone is diagnosed with ADHD, their brain is actually impaired. They're not able to engage in these activities, or I would say avoid some of these behaviors without supports put in place. So a couple of additional things that I want to note. So some parts of the brain tend to actually be a little smaller and sometimes take longer to mature in students with ADHD. So this is why some students, especially younger students with ADHD, may seem very immature. It's because their brains are actually taking longer to mature than peers without ADHD. And again, some of those neural networks as a result may take longer to develop or may be less efficient in students with ADHD. So again, it may take them longer to recall information. Processing speed can absolutely be affected. And again, as a result, children with ADHD tend to have a significant deficit in working memory, and again, will have a slower processing speed. Some of this may be due to the need to shift focus suddenly. So if someone starts talking to you, it may take a while for you to shift your focus to that person talking, and you may need more time to be able to shift your focus, take in what they're saying, and then respond appropriately. And so again, those are just things that I wanted to note or highlight. So again, a lot of this may sound very familiar to you. Students with ADHD may sort of demand attention. I don't know how the word demand is interesting, but they may talk out of turn or even move around the room. Part of that is due to impulsivity, that I have something I need to say and I need to say it now, or I need to go do this or get this now. I will take just a moment to note that there is a lot of comorbidity between ADHD and other disabilities or disorders, meaning that there's a higher occurrence of those other disabilities or disorders in individuals with ADHD ADHD is often linked with anxiety. ADHD can also be linked with OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder. And individuals with ADHD are also more likely to be autistic. So sometimes those impulsivity behaviors are linked again to anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder. And with that direct connection to ADHD. So I did just want to take a moment to say that. Students with ADHD may have trouble following instructions, especially if they're presented several instructions at a time in a list, especially if that list is presented vocally, not visually, and with operations that require ordered steps. So first this, then this, then this, then this. So things like long division or solving equations, or even how to put something together. If all of those instructions are presented at once and vocally, and there's nothing to refer back to, students with ADHD will likely have difficulty following that. They often forget to write down homework assignments, do them, or even bring the completed work to school. Sometimes when we start to break those tasks down individually, we can realize how many steps are involved in being able to do something as simple as a homework assignment. Students have to write down that they need to do it. Then they need to remember to bring all the materials they need home with them. Then they have to sit down, get out the materials. Really, they have to check the list to see what they have to do. Then sit down, get all of the materials, then go through that homework assignment step by step, then put all of the materials back into some type of backpack or organization system to bring back to school. And then they have to remember to bring all of that back to school with them. Then remember to take it out and turn it in. There's so many steps involved in that sometimes that can be overwhelming for someone with ADHD, or they may forget one component of it. So you may have students that complete a full assignment, but forget to turn it in. Some students with ADHD will lack fine motor control, especially younger students, which can make note-taking difficult, and their handwriting can be, as a result, difficult to read. They also have difficulty with long-term projects where there is no direct supervision, because again, breaking a larger project down into smaller components in order to be able to complete those on a timeline is something that students with ADHD struggle with. And they often struggle to contribute during group work and may even sometimes keep a group from accomplishing their task as a result. Oh, I went way too far down. There we go. Okay, so inattentive symptoms of ADHD. And again, these are what you are more commonly see in females that are diagnosed with ADHD, but you definitely also see this in males. They may make careless mistakes in their schoolwork and overlook details. They're easily distracted or sidetracked. Again, they have difficulty following instructions. They don't seem to be listening when they're spoken to directly. A lot of times, again, they are focused on one thing and struggle to shift their focus. They have trouble organizing tasks and possessions. They'll often, or not always, of course, but at times they will fail to finish work in school. They may avoid or resist tasks that require sustained mental effort, including doing homework, because again, that reward center in their brain does not provide that intrinsic reinforcement for completing tasks. And they often lose homework assignments, books, jackets, backpacks, anything that is basically in their direct care. They will often lose track of it because of their inattention. And then the hyperactive or impulsive symptoms of ADHD. They often fidget or squirm. They may have trouble staying in their seat, run and climb when it's inappropriate, have trouble playing quietly. They might be extremely impatient. They always seem to be on the go or driven by a motor. Again, that's that impulsivity and hyperactivity. They may talk excessively, especially on one particular topic, but then that may dive off in many, many different directions. May blurt out questions before or blurt out answers before a question is even completed. That's the impulsivity component. And they may interrupt or intrude on others' conversations, activities, or even possessions. And again, that's the impulsivity aspect. It's not that they don't understand boundaries, it's impulsivity of interjecting or compulsive behavior. So now that I've talked about all of the behaviors that can manifest, do you want to take some time to talk about specific strategies for students who have ADHD? So successful programs for these students integrate three components: accommodations. So what can teachers do to make learning easier for students with ADHD? Instruction, so really focusing on the methods you use in teaching to make sure that the instruction you're providing is accessible for those students. And intervention, how you can address behaviors that disrupt concentration or distract other students. So one of the accommodations that you can make involves seating, simply where you place the student in the classroom. So it can be helpful to place the student away from windows and away from the door, because those are places in a classroom where there tends to be a lot of movement, and that physical movement, even if it's in someone's visual periphery, they can still see it on the side, can be very distracting and can pull focus pretty easily. You can put the student with ADHD right in front of your desk. That way you are able to prompt them and monitor their work. Unless that would potentially be a distraction for other students. You can put seats in rows with the focus on the teacher. That usually works better for students with ADHD than having them facing other students. Now, I am a fan of adjusting your classroom environment to fit whatever activity you are doing for the day. So there may be times where students do need to face each other, but for students with ADHD, it tends to help if their body is physically pointing in the direction of where their focus needs to go. And you definitely want to create a quiet area free of distractions for test taking and quiet study. So a lot of times students with ADHD will test in separate environments just so that they can focus and not be distracted by other students. Also, sometimes they may need to take quick movement breaks, and those movement breaks will actually help them focus when they come back to the task, but those movement breaks can be distracting to other students. So just be mindful, sometimes it can help to have those students take assessments in other areas. Another accommodation is in how you deliver information. A lot of times we will provide many instructions to students all at once because it helps when we're moving into a transition. Here are all of the things you need to know for the activity that's coming up. Students with ADHD, because of their slow processing speed and their difficulty with working memory. Again, working memory is your ability to hold on to information that you only need for a short period of time. So if I give you directions on how to get somewhere, your working memory is what holds on to that information. If you're trying to remember a set of numbers for a brief period of time, it's your working memory that holds on to that. So because of that, deficit or difficulty with working memory, students with ADHD, if you give them a list of instructions vocally and they have no way of referring back to it, they really struggle to hang on to that information. So it's helpful to not only present it vocally, but especially if it's a list of instructions, to have a visual checklist or a visual list that breaks especially more complex tasks down into individual steps, so that a student with ADHD can see that list and they can complete one step and then mark it off and know to go to the next step. It, again, not only helps them remember what those instructions are, but it also helps them break a more complex task down into smaller, more manageable pieces. So this can be true for things like how to begin a specific project, even how to complete a specific math problem. Having those visual directions or a checklist can really help students. So you definitely want to try to give instructions one at a time and then repeat them as necessary. If you don't want to have to vocally repeat them, again, that's why I recommend that visual list as well. If possible, you want to work on the most difficult material earlier in the day. Again, because focusing on tasks and maintaining that focus is so much more difficult. It requires more cognitive load from individuals with ADHD. So further into the day, they'll actually tend to have more difficulty focusing and more difficulty processing and more difficulty remaining seated. So that's why it's, if possible, it's better to do the more difficult material early. Again, using visuals as much as possible is great. Using charts or checklists, also using pictures, because if there are a lot of words on a page, it can be difficult for them to slow down and focus on each individual component. Also, color coding is very, very helpful because it's a visual cue for someone with ADHD that helps them stay organized. So putting one type of work on one sheet of paper, or for this class, you will need this folder. For this activity, you will need this sheet, and actually color coding that system helps that student stay more organized. And if you are going to have students with ADHD take notes, which you likely are, it's very helpful to create outlines for note taking that help them organize the information as you deliver it, because it can be very difficult, again, for students with ADHD to process information and for their working memory to hold on to it. So they struggle to get all of the information that they need during a lecture. So guided notes are an example of a great tool for students with ADHD because it helps them focus in on the important information and helps them take and organize their notes. So again, especially if it's something that you know is important and you definitely want the student to know. Another accommodation for student work would be to create worksheets and tests with fewer items. And so you're assessing the same content, but there may be less math problems that the student needs to do, at least at that point in time. So what I will often tell teachers is to think about chunking assignments, so breaking it down into smaller chunks. So the student with ADHD will still complete the same amount of work, but they complete it in smaller portions so that they're able to sustain focus for that shorter period of time before they take a movement break or really just are able to shift their focus to something else, because again, maintaining focus for a long period of time can be difficult. It might also be a good idea to give frequent short quizzes rather than a very long test, and definitely reduce the number of timed tests. Students with ADHD, because of that slower processing speed, often need longer periods of time to demonstrate their full ability on tasks. So this is why a lot of times I will also recommend giving students extended time if needed, if that time is being used well. I already mentioned this, but I don't know that I actually listed in here, but movement breaks can help very well. I would almost have a visual schedule for students, and in that visual schedule have set times during each hour where that student can get up and move. Because by giving them the ability to move, they're able to engage with some of that hyperactivity, and also just that movement can help them come back and regain focus. So Another thing that you would want to consider is testing students with ADHD in a way that they do best. So maybe you ask them questions and they're able to respond orally, or possibly by filling in blanks, rather than having to write really long sustained passages. Again, that's a skill that they will need, and so one that you do want to have them do. But if the focus of the test is on being able to share knowledge about a specific period in history, not on being able to compose an essay, you may want to consider another way for them to demonstrate that understanding. And I already mentioned this, but I'll say it again. Another accommodation is dividing long-term projects into segments and assigning a completion goal for each segment. Again, students with ADHD tend to really struggle with time management. So if you can take a larger project and break it down into smaller steps, and then help them set goals for when they're going to complete each component, it tends to help them focus and complete each component to help finish that long-term project. I would also recommend, but again, this is up to you, accepting late work and at least giving partial credit for partial work, because we know students with ADHD tend to struggle to maintain focus for long periods of time, especially if that task or activity is timed. I would consider giving them extra time, or at least recognizing the effort they put in on the first part of the assignment. Another big thing is organization. So one of the things that can help your students a lot is if you help them establish and maintain an organization system. This will require planning on your part and collaborating with the student on which system will work best. Also teaching them use of the system and prompting them to use it. So providing verbal reminders, or even again, creating that visual checklist that they have and teaching them to use it, that can help them stay organized. So students could have a master binder with a separate section for each subject, and then you can help make sure that everything that goes into that binder or notebook is in the correct section. And one of the ways you can help is by color coding materials for each subject. I don't know if you've ever looked in the backpack or the desk or of a student who has ADHD. Things are typically shoved in everywhere. There is no organization system. So helping that student establish that helps them remain organized and helps them which can help them stay focused on the tasks that are due and with completing those tasks and turning them in. It's also helpful if you can provide some type of notebook insert for homework assignments, some way for them to organize. This is what I need to do. This is what's completed and I need to turn in, and anything they need to take home to their parents, so that those are in 3 separate places so that they know where to find that information. You also want to make sure that the student has a system for writing down assignments and important dates, and that they use it. And again, that will require you teaching them that system and then prompting them to use it and following up with them, and probably providing some type of reward or reinforcer for using it. Again, students with ADHD don't tend to have that natural reward system in their brain, or at least I should say it's inhibited. So we, as much as possible, providing external rewards or reinforcers is very, very helpful, even if that's just praise from you for doing what they should be doing, or stickers, star charts, whatever it might be. You also want to make sure that you provide that student with time to organize their materials and assignments to go home, and then even post steps for them. You need to take this, don't forget this, make sure you write this down, so that they have that very clearly outlined and can go through each step in order to help them organize their time and their materials. Instructional strategies. When you are starting a lesson for students with ADHD, it is very helpful if you signal the start of the lesson with some type of audio or oral cue, such as an egg timer, a cowbell, a horn, some type of noise. That helps those students know that it is time for them to shift their focus. If you just start talking, they may not even recognize that you are talking to them. I hear that comment a lot. I didn't even know you were talking to me. They don't know to shift their focus. Sometimes you can even say their name directly and they may not respond, but some type of auditory cue that you can teach them. This means we are about to start, and cues them in. They know what that auditory cue means, and they're able to shift their focus to what you are about to do. So again, it just cues them in. You can use that same auditory cue to let them know, okay, we have this much time left. Again, it just helps them know to shift their focus. Now I would use this one with caution, but it can help to establish eye contact with a student that has ADHD. They don't have to maintain that eye contact. Maintaining eye contact can be very uncomfortable for some individuals, especially individuals with who are autistic. And we know that ADHD and autism are often comorbid, meaning they occur together. So establishing eye contact is helpful because you have their attention, but you don't want to force it, or especially force them to maintain it. Even sometimes the student turning towards you can be a good signal. You definitely want to make sure that you list all of the activities either on the board or on some other type of visual space for the student. So it could be something they have on their desk. It could be written up on the board. Wherever you list those items, you want to make sure that they are consistently listed in that space. If it is shifting from spot to spot, day to day, the student won't necessarily know where to look to use that list. And it's a nice visual support for them. Now, also in the opening of the lesson, and really this is best practice with all students, you want to tell the students what they're going to learn and what your expectations are for the lesson. So you want to tell them exactly what materials they'll need. It helps cue them in on what they're going to do and helps them get together what they need so they can make sure they're ready to learn. Now, when you are actually conducting the lessons, you want to make sure that you keep the instructions simple and structured. Use props, charts, and other visual aids so that the student can follow along with those instructions. And again, you want to try to avoid multi-step instructions all in a row, if possible, without the use of some type of visual aid to help the student see those steps. It's really, really good to vary the pace if possible and include different types of activities. Many students with ADHD will do well with some type of game or another activity that is rapid. It helps maintain their focus because it shifts, but also it provides that opportunity for an extrinsic reward. So, and especially if you're varying the pace, if it's not at the same pace the entire time, it's easier for them to maintain focus. Again, if it's constantly at the same pace, their focus will tend to wander. It's very helpful to have an unobtrusive but pre-established cue set up with the student who has ADHD. It could be a touch on the shoulder if the student is comfortable with that, or placing a sticky note on their desk, or again, some type of auditory cue that can remind the student to stay on task. Again, you want it to be unobtrusive because you don't want to unintentionally shame or call out that student in front of their peers, but having some type of cue established with them that they are comfortable with that allows you to remind them, okay, make sure you're focusing on what you're supposed to be focusing on, and make sure you're staying on task. That can help cue them to shift their focus back to the task. But again, you want to pre-establish that with the student, make sure they know what that cue is communicating to them, and also make sure it's unobtrusive. I almost said unobstructed, unobtrusive, so that it doesn't distract other students or single out that particular student. It does help to allow a student with ADHD to take movement breaks, or to even let them squeeze something or tap something, as long as it doesn't make a noise, because that does provide a physical outlet. I've seen bands stretched across the legs of chairs before so that the student with ADHD can actually bounce their foot on the band, and that allows them physical movement without actually having to get up from their desk. But some type of physical break can help those students with either maintaining focus in the moment or being able, again, to take that break and come back to then sustain focus for another period of time. So it's important that you have those embedded for students. And this is also, if possible, you want to try to not ask a student with ADHD to perform a task or answer a question publicly that might be too difficult. And again, this is because of the frequent comorbidity with ADHD and anxiety. Sometimes being called out or asked to do something in front of a group, if they don't already know how to do it or something that might be too difficult, can increase their anxiety. And again, because of their the difficulties with working memory and processing speed, they may be slower to respond or be able to initiate a task in front of a group. And that can increase anxiety, which then decreases their ability to perform even more. So if you are going to ask a student with ADHD a question in front of the group, it's good to know that they definitely can perform the skill or will be able to answer the question. And it may even be helpful to let them know beforehand. This is a question I'm going to ask you in class, or this is a problem that I'm going to ask you to solve for the group, if you don't mind, because I know you're really good at solving these types of math problems, and I'd love for you to be able to show that to everyone. That way they know that they're going to be doing it, and they can have some time to prepare. All right, now ending the lesson. It is very helpful for students with ADHD if you summarize the key points of the lesson. Again, that helps them focus in on the more important parts of what was discussed that way, in the same way that guided notes can help them focus in on important parts of a lecture. So it helps them really know what they need to take away, what they need to place in their long-term memory. And if you give an assignment, it is very helpful to have 3 different students repeat it. What are you doing tonight? What is your homework tonight? When is your homework due? Have students repeat it, because they're hearing it multiple times. They're seeing it up on the board. And then you can have the entire class say it in unison. When information is presented to us in multiple different ways, we're more likely to retain it, because when we try to remember it, we have a memory of it visually stored, and we also have that auditory memory stored. And so it makes it much easier for us to recall that information. So having students repeat it, having all students say it, and then writing it on the board, that means we're exposed to it at least a multitude of different ways. I'm hearing it, I'm saying it, and I'm seeing it. And so it's much more likely to be stored in my memory. Again, you want to be specific about what the student should take home and create checklists for that student. Here is what you need to do. This is first step, second step, third step. Here's what you need to do tonight. Or again, even throughout the school day, here's what you need to do. All right, so I'm going to pause there for a moment. I feel like I've been talking for a very long time. So the latter part, the next 11 or so slides, focuses on students with ASD. So I don't know if you want me to go ahead and continue, if you want me to pause for a moment, see if there are any questions.
So 5 seconds for everybody to decide if you want to ask a question, because to me it seems like it was so detailed that, you know, like I've just crossed out all of my questions because you've explained everything. So I believe that's
great.
really precise. Yeah, I believe you can continue, so we just don't you know, keep you along here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. So this is, I will tell you, there are entire courses taught on this next subject. This is again something like I took I took multiple courses on this subject, but one semester was just on autism strategies and techniques for those students. So what I'm going to give you is a very general overview. If you would like more information, I can definitely provide more information in this area as well. Because again, we know autism spectrum disorder, it is a spectrum. So you have students that have a wide variety of needs across that entire spectrum, and various strengths and various difficulties. So I am going to, again, give you kind of broad strokes for areas that students with ASD tend to struggle, and some things that you can do, some supports that you can put in place. But there is so much more information to share on this topic. So if you do have a student with ASD and you need more, I just want to, again, express, please feel encouraged to reach out to me directly. There is so much more I can provide. And students with ASD, as it is, again, a spectrum, their abilities vary. So some of the strategies I may talk about today might not work well with your particular student. So if you can and feel comfortable doing so, if you reach out to me directly and tell me a little bit about your student, I can give you more specific strategies tailored for that student. So again, this is going to be a general overview, but there is much more I can provide specific to students if needed. So, oh, well, I thought it wasn't going to progress for a moment. So Autism Spectrum Disorder, also known as ASD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder that typically affects a person's ability to communicate and interact socially with others. The other thing that I want to note is that autism spectrum disorder is also very commonly tied to sensory issues. So a lot of individuals with ASD have significant sensitivity to certain sensory exposure. So high sensitivity to loud noises, high sensitivity to certain touches or tastes, or even visual stimuli can all be very overwhelming for individuals with ASD. I do want to note very quickly, and I said this previously, but there is a high occurrence of individuals with ASD also having ADHD, but even individuals who just have ADHD, just have that diagnosis, can also have sensitivity to sensory exposure, particularly loud noises. So if you notice a student that seems to become anxious or upset when loud noises occur, I would definitely, regardless of their diagnosis, take steps to help them handle that, whether it's by having some type of headphones that they can wear, or letting them know when a loud noise is going to occur if possible, or at least giving them an opportunity to escape that loud noise. Many students with ASD also exhibit challenging or repetitive behaviors. This is also often referred to as stereotypy, meaning that they engage in the same behavior over and over again. I do want to take a moment to note that autistic adults have communicated, and also younger individuals with autism have indicated that a lot of times that stereotypy or repetitive behavior is actually a way of handling anxiety. So if possible, as long as that repetitive behavior is not significantly disrupting the learning environment or causing harm to anyone, and again, it's not significantly inhibiting their ability to engage in learning, if possible, to allow them to engage in those repetitive behaviors, that stereotypy or the stemming, it's also called, then it's again, based on advocates from this community, they've asked individuals to let them do that. So again, some individuals who are stimming might shake their hands like this. And if that's not disrupting anyone or causing issues, again, it can help with calming and anxiety. You might see individuals who are autistic, their stimming increase in more stressful situations. And that is often why they're using that as an attempt to calm themselves. Again, autism can, but does not always affect an individual's cognitive ability. And again, I just want to stress that since autism is a spectrum disorder, it does affect each person differently and presents with varying degrees of severity. So you will have individuals who cannot, they do not have vocal verbal communication, whereas other individuals with ASD may be able to have a wide repertoire of vocal verbal behavior. But it is common that individuals with ASD have difficulty with communication, and approximately 30 to 50% of children with ASD are minimally verbal upon entering school. And most experience some form of impairment in receptive and expressive communication. So the communication that they take in, as well as the communication that they express. Most will experience impairments in both of those. And the ongoing struggle for some autistic individuals in social contexts can be attributed to their inability to interpret social cues. So this is very common. Sometimes individuals, or a lot of individuals with ASD, may not know if someone's joking. They may not understand sarcasm. They also may not understand nonverbal body cues indicating that someone is disinterested or someone is upset or even that someone is happy. So sometimes individuals with ASD may misinterpret anger and physical aggression as actually someone being happy and and excited. And so again, that can lead to anxiety on the part of the individual with ASD, but it can also put them in situations where they don't understand the potential threat of harm that is present. Individuals with ASD can also often appear socially awkward because of the repetitive behaviors, because they tend to focus in on a specific topic and talk about and perseverate on that topic a lot. And because they don't necessarily pick up on social cues and will not always make or sustain eye contact, they can appear socially awkward, which can then lead to rejection by their peers, and unfortunately also sometimes become victims of teasing and bullying. And so these circumstances directly affect a child's emotional well-being, that social isolation. Now, there are individuals with ASD who do not seek out social interaction, and that's because in a lot of cases it is anxiety inducing. They don't have a form of communication. They often tend to focus on something that they enjoy and they're not necessarily reinforced by social interactions. Some are, however, and that social isolation can be very upsetting, unfortunately. Again, individuals with ASD engage in a lot of repetitive behaviors or routines. A lot of times these routines can be self-soothing. So you'll notice that individuals with ASD do like routine, they like predictability, and do not like changes in their surrounding environment or in the events that are occurring. And again, this is linked to increased rates of anxiety, which then can result in engaging in challenging behaviors to avoid that whatever is causing the anxiety. So again, a lot of changes in routines can lead to challenging behaviors because of that increase in anxiety as a result. And so struggles for individuals with ASD to actually stop their routines or repetitive behaviors can also contribute to their social discomfort, because again, a lot of times those routines or repetitive behaviors are self-soothing. And those repetitive behaviors have become self-soothing, and they typically occur because of impairment in individuals with ASD's executive functioning system. So again, they tend to engage in those behaviors as a result. And I already really mentioned this, but any shift in routine, and especially transitions, tend to be very difficult for autistic students because of that resulting anxiety. It becomes they're less able to predict what's going to happen. Autistic children also experience deficits in imitation and observational learning, meaning that they will often need explicit instruction in a skill. They won't necessarily be able to observe someone else engaging in the skill and then imitate that to be able to learn. And then students with ASD do tend to have superior visual processing skills, but they often process auditory and like verbally presented information at a rate that is much slower than their peers. So you'll notice, similar to students with ADHD, it is very helpful for students with ASD to have visual presentation of information. They will process it much more quickly and at a higher level than if it's presented commonly. This isn't always true across the board, but then if it's presented auditorily. So especially pictures can be helpful, especially if those pictures are depicting exactly what the individual is supposed to do or is a picture of the environment. So when teaching a student with ASD a particular skill, visual models, including pictures or video, can help, especially if the pictures or video are of the student doing the skill themselves or someone who looks a lot like them. So I will say, final note on this slide is that impairment to the executive functioning system does prevent them from being able to process multi-step instruction directions similar to students with ADHD if they're presented all at once. It's also difficult for them to maintain organization of their materials and also sustain self-motivation. So many of the strategies that I mentioned for students with ADHD will also work very well for students with ASD, again, because of that comorbidity that often occurs, but because they similarly have impairment in their executive functioning system. Again, depending on the cognitive abilities, which is varied across this group, autistic children may also struggle with literacy, so they may be able to decode a text. Again, they have those visual skills, but they may have problems understanding what they've read, especially literary texts, because a lot of times literary texts like novels or short stories ask students to make inferences or imagine things that are not concrete, and so students with ASD may struggle to make those connections, and often their reading comprehension capabilities don't actually match their decoding skills. And just like with students with ADHD, they may struggle with fine motor skills, and especially visual motor speed may be diminished as well. So they may have difficulty holding a writing utensil like a pencil or a pen. And even when they can hold it, their printing may be illegible or difficult. This is why a lot of students with ASD may use technology instead of writing something out by hand, because it's much easier for them to use something like a computer than use those fine motor skills of holding a pencil and then using it to write. So unfortunately, that combination of communicative, social, and behavioral impairments can directly impact the chances of a student with ASD excelling academically. Even if they don't have a deficit in cognitive abilities, those other difficulties or impairments can limit their ability to take in information, process it at the same speed as their peers, and then demonstrate that skill acquisition. So strategies for working with these students. And again, you'll see some overlap from the strategies I discussed previously, but most of those strategies for students with ADHD will also work very well for students with ASD. So as I mentioned earlier, there is frequently a deficit in social skills, and this is rooted in autistic individuals' difficulty and it's not, again, across the board, but often individuals with autism will struggle to observe someone and then imitate what they're doing. So they will often need explicit and direct instruction in social skills. And they are most effective when they're taught within the natural environment in which they're expected to engage in that behavior. So if I'm going to teach a student how to ask for help, if I'm going to teach them how to begin a conversation with a peer, if I teach them how to do that in a school office, away from other students, it's going to be more difficult for that student to generalize that skill back to the classroom. So it's better for that student if they're able to learn and practice that skill in the environment where they're going to be expected to engage in it. So learning and practicing how to ask a peer to play with them on the playground, learning and practicing how to ask for help in the classroom, learning and practicing how to wait in line in the cafeteria. Those are you want as much as possible to teach and have them practice those skills with feedback from you in those environments where they're going to be engaging in those skills. Now, the social skills that are appropriate within school, again, they're most effective when they're taught within that school environment. And peer models and tutors are often successful in helping to increase the social skills in students with ASD. So if you can pick a peer that would serve as a good model for that student, or even a peer tutor, it can help increase their social skills just through engaging with that individual. And being able to practice social skills with that individual. You can also engage students in playful imitation games. If you, and again, this is doing it without mocking the student, but if you can imitate them and then they imitate you, so they might get to like do a behavior like clapping their hands or tapping their hands on the surface, and then you do the same. And then you might do a behavior like clapping your hands, and then they do a behavior, they imitate you. By turning that into a game, you can actually increase students' imitation skills by giving them opportunities to practice. You can also use strategic classroom computer applications, and those can help enhance social skills of students with autism, again, because they're learning and engaging in imitation, which is helpful when learning social skills. And again, computers and use of technology tend to be highly reinforcing for individuals with autism. So having them engage using any type of computer-based instruction, there's a lot of research on using computer-based instruction. Again, it tends to be highly engaging, especially because it doesn't require some of those fine motor skills that other activities might. And so again, just quick note, you can use that imitation to encourage students to practice specific social skills. Now, as far as behavioral interventions go, I always recommend that if you have a student who is engaging in significant challenging behavior, that you develop a plan that is very specific to that student, looking at the function or why they are engaging in the behavior, and then helping them figure out a more appropriate way that they can access or avoid whatever it is they're trying to access or avoid. So for example, if you've determined that a student is engaging in physical aggression to avoid working on a non-preferred task, I would identify a way that that student can avoid working on the non-preferred task that doesn't involve physical aggression. Maybe they can ask for a break. Maybe they can ask for help. Maybe you can offer some form of choice to that student. But again, with those challenging behaviors, you're going to want to individualize your plan for that specific student and teach them another way to either access whatever it is they're wanting to access or avoid whatever it is they're wanting to avoid. And then if possible, when they engage in the challenging behavior, You're not going to give them access to what it is they're trying to access, or you're not necessarily going to help them avoid what they're wanting to avoid, but you're going to remind them of that other way you taught them. So for example, if a student becomes aggressive in order to avoid a task, when they become aggressive, you won't necessarily remove the task, but you will remind them, if you want a break, you can ask for a break. Do you want a break? And if they say yes, then you give them their break. But you don't give them their break when they become physically aggressive, unless, of course, you need to keep yourself safe. Obviously, that's the number one priority. Again, that's what I recommend for individual students engaging in challenging behavior. If you would like more information on how to set up those types of systems, those more specific individualized systems, please reach out to me. I do have resources that walk you through the steps of identifying what the function of the behavior is, and then how you can develop a plan in response to that. So beyond that, here are some general ideas of behavioral interventions that you can put in place that tend to work for autistic students. Reinforcement systems work very well because, again, similar to students with ADHD, students with ASD don't always have high levels of dopamine in response to completing specific tasks. So having external reward systems in place is very helpful. It also lends a sense of predictability to the student's environment. And we know routines and schedules and predictability are extremely important for students with ASD. So you can have a system where the student can choose between two different tasks, or they can choose which two different activities they want to work for. And once they complete their task, they can gain access to that activity they've chosen. Or maybe if they get like a check mark or a star sticker or something for completing certain tasks, and once they've earned 5 stars or 5 check marks or whatever it may be, then they get access to a preferred activity or a break or something else. But students with ASD tend to remain more on task and engage in fewer challenging behaviors when they have these reinforcement systems in place. And these are systems that you, again, can fade over time. So they don't necessarily have to stay in place indefinitely. And I'm going to say this like probably 50 times, but if you would like more information about how to establish reinforcement systems and how to fade them, I can provide information on that as well. You can also, similarly to students with ADHD, you can change the methods of how they complete tasks. So using technology, using that computer-based instruction can be helpful. You definitely want to think about what it is that you are wanting to assess and what are the different ways the student can demonstrate this understanding. And then changing the methods of how that student completes the task to encourage their engagement, while also making sure you're still assessing that skill and giving them the opportunity to demonstrate it. And you can embed choice in instruction, but you do want those choices to be limited, because sometimes individuals with ASD and ADHD can be overwhelmed if there are too many choices. So as I mentioned earlier, you could give them a choice between 2 different tasks, or give them a choice in 2 different ways of demonstrating their understanding. But if you embed too many choices for students, it can be overwhelming, but embedding some choice can increase engagement. Also, as I mentioned previously, visual schedules are great because autistic individuals tend to process things visually at a much higher speed and more accurately than they do when information is presented in other forms. Also, visual schedules make the day more predictable, so the student can know what's coming, which tends to be less anxiety inducing. I will also say, as far as scheduling and even transition goes, as much as you can pre-cue the individual that a transition is coming, or there's going to be a change in the routine, it is helpful to let them know as soon as possible. Now, if I know we're going to have a fire drill and the alarm's going to go off, and I know it's going to happen a week from now, I'm not going to tell my student with ASD today, because that's too far away. They won't remember. And that may very well be an anxiety-inducing situation for them. So I may decide the morning of the fire drill to let them know that there is going to be a fire drill that morning, but that we are going to go to this area, or this is how we're going to handle it. So they know that there's going to be that shift in their day. For other students, sometimes knowing that that type of anxiety-inducing activity or situation is coming may actually increase their anxiety and make it difficult for them to focus, and may result in challenging behaviors. So for other students, you may want to prepare for it in other ways, but not let them know until it is just about to happen. In most cases, however, so you want to make that determination based on your individual student. But in many cases, it is a good idea to let them know if something is going to be different. So when you know that transitions are coming regularly throughout the day, or a much larger transition, if possible, you do want to include the student in the development of their transition plan, so they kind of know what's coming, know what's going to happen. So again, letting them understand what that transition is going to look like. You want to make sure that you individualize transition plans to ensure that they meet the needs of every student, rather than just sort of going, okay, everyone, here's how we're going to transition to this activity. It's also helpful for you to predict stressors that you know the students may encounter, so that you can pre-teach them coping strategies to help them deal with them. So for example, if you have a student that you know loud noises are highly aversive, and again, there's going to be a fire drill, you want to teach them how they can handle those loud noises, or what, let them know they can put on headphones, or some other way that they can respond to that stressor so they can cope with it in the moment. And you also want to provide students with general strategies to help with various forms of stress. So again, you may not always be able to predict things like loud noises or other stressful situations. There may be a sudden change in routine that the student is not expecting. So you also want to make sure that you teach them general coping strategies, so that they know, this is what I can do when I am getting stressed. I know that I can go to this place if I need to be by myself. I know that I can access these specific supports if I need them. So it's good during times when stress is not occurring to teach students those coping strategies. And I'll be honest, that's actually true for any student that struggles with stress. So students that have trauma exposure, students with high levels of anxiety, students with ADHD, and students with ASD, teaching them those coping skills before they're in a stressful situation helps them better self-manage their behaviors during those moments. And ideally, you're going to implement independent learning programs for these students so that you can decrease their reliance on your support. So initially, a lot of students with ASD and ADHD may need a lot of prompting and reminders to stay on task, but ideally, you're going to fade those prompts and cues over time. And again, like I said, I'm going to say it 50 times. If you want more information on how to fade those prompts and cues over time, I can absolutely provide that. There's a variety of types of prompting systems you can use, and each one comes with a plan to fade it over time so that that student doesn't become what we call prompt dependent, meaning they need prompts from you to initiate anything. I've seen students that that can't move from one space to another without prompts from an adult because they've become so prompt dependent. They don't initiate anything without a prompt from an adult. And that's not what we want to create. We ideally want to create independence. So even if you have a prompting system in place, which you will likely need, you want to have a plan to fade it over time. Now, for students with ASD, and again, this is a spectrum, so they will have varying levels of academic needs and strengths and difficulties, but these are strategies that have demonstrated success across students with autism with varying levels of abilities. Again, computer-based instruction, using that in a variety of ways. There's a lot of research that supports the use of technology with students with ASD. You can also use what's called adapted shared reading activities. This is where an adult reads aloud to a student while engaging that student in interaction by asking questions and discussion. You can also pair this with a strategy called Think Aloud. The Think Aloud strategy is where you model for that student what you are thinking as you are reading. And this is pre-scripted in some ways by you, but also as you're reading, you can stop and say, I noticed in this last sentence, he talked about walking without shoes. Why might he be walking without shoes? Maybe he doesn't have shoes. Why might he not have shoes? And so engage them in these questions that really helps them understand the process of making inferences, modeling what type of information to pay attention to, how to make connections between what they're reading and what they already know or other experiences, being able to connect different parts of the story. So being able to read out loud and also sharing your thoughts out loud and modeling that for students with ASD helps them begin to engage in that process themselves. You also, again, breaking down tasks into manageable components that can be taught in several steps is very helpful. Providing detailed instruction. So again, breaking things down, providing details, but not in a way that is overwhelming. So being able to chunk those activities and provide visual instructions, multiple steps using pictures or words can be very helpful. That leads right into using visual supports and verbal prompting. Now you can also use visual prompting and physical prompting, but again, any physical contact with students, you want to make sure that they are comfortable with that. But visual supports are very helpful, whether it's pictures, a video, written out lists of directions, and verbal prompting and reminders can also help as well. Again, the more consistent you are in providing these and embedding them into systems, the more routine it becomes for that individual, and it makes it easier for them to adapt when those supports are removed. You also want to provide clear explanations of the skill or task sequence. Don't assume that an individual knows how to do a step unless you've seen them demonstrate it multiple times and with these materials, because again, students with ASD may sometimes struggle to generalize without supports. You also want to provide modeling, guided practice, meaning you model it for them and then you watch as they practice and guide them through the steps, and then give them multiple opportunities to independently practice with feedback from you. And again, you want to make sure that you establish a structured learning environment that is very predictable for the student. Establish those consistent routines, both in the classroom and throughout the day, with visual supports reminding students of those routines, and have those written and those written and visual schedules visible in a consistent location for students so that they can access them as needed. So Sorry for my little slip up at the end there. That is the last slide that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I will also send this PowerPoint to you all so that you can have it and look back over the information that I provided and use it as a resource. And again, I will include my email address. So if there's anything that you want to ask about specifically, anything you need, any additional resources on anything that I described, I'm happy to provide it.
That is just incredible. So we appreciate it so much. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just, like super excited. So again, I was just thinking about that. I'm very much into like science, into quantum physics and physics, and I can watch like those videos, like an hour long, and like not like even glimpsing away. But you have provided the same, like surrounding for me, so I just couldn't, stare away from you. So that's just really amazing. I believe this was as much as informative for everybody else as for me. So definitely very like condensed, profound overview. So you've like provided us with so many details. I believe this is going to be very useful for us, and we're going to implement all of the tips we've heard today. And I believe if we still have a couple of minutes for the questions from the audience, that would be just great. So thank you so much for spending so much time with us. We appreciate it again.
Oh,
so
thank
anybody?
you.
Any questions about ADHD or ASD, about your students? Maybe something was not, you didn't understand, that you want some more details. So definitely Erica has mentioned she's going to provide some extra stuff. That is very nice of you, Erica. If so, we're going to contact you. Hopefully not too much, so we're not going to overwhelm you with the requests, but that's just appreciated so much. So while anybody's thinking of the questions, I have one. So you mentioned that students with ADHD and ASD may struggle with those social skills, and I just thought about I observed a situation. So I had a situation like that in my class. So obviously a student with ADHD, we were having a group activity, and he or she was constantly interrupting and like did not understand, actually, well, it turns out he or she didn't understand the rules. And how to, are there any tips on how to prevent that and how to deal with that interruption, the lack of those social skills and understanding on how to cooperate, how to work in the group? So I believe this could be applicable to both the ADHD and ASD, as you mentioned.
I think there are a couple of different options that you can take. One interesting thing is sometimes just by having a student monitor their own behavior, it's really interesting. Research has shown us when we monitor our own behavior, that has an impact on our behavior. So any of you that have any type of tool that like monitors the number of steps you take in a day, or once you start tracking the number of cigarettes you smoke, that will impact your behavior. The same is true for students. So even having the students start tracking the number of times they interrupt or call out in class, if they know that that is something that they're wanting to decrease just by self-monitoring their own behavior, that will result in a decrease. That's a very easy strategy you can put in place. I would also potentially tie some type of external reward to lowering that number of times that they call out. And I would also think, is there another way that this student can comment or contribute without calling out? So is there a way that I can have some type of interactive tool? Like maybe I have something on the board and the students can like type a response and it can go up there, or they can write it on a slip of paper in hand and post it somewhere. Is there a way that they can still engage in that behavior of responding without it being vocal or out loud? That way it doesn't interrupt. I would also look to reinforce the behavior of either raising their hand or waiting for turn taking in conversations. And sometimes to start with, it's helpful to have some type of even physical item that they know, if I have this, I can talk. So that helps them understand now it's my turn. And it helps with understanding turn taking in conversations. So when I have the item, that is when I can speak. And that visual representation, again, can help with that back and forth. So sometimes teachers, and again, you have to know your students to know if this would be safe, will have like like an inflatable beach ball or something small that if someone throws it or drops it or gets hit with it, it won't hurt, but they can toss it back and forth. And whoever has that, it is their turn to speak, or it can be something like that. And again, that helps establish turn taking, and they understand I can only speak when I have that. If that doesn't work, again, providing some type of visual cue or vocal cue. And a lot of times, again, students with ADHD, if they are commenting, it's related to impulsivity, but they're also seeking that external affirmation or reward. So sometimes withholding that, like withholding attention. So if you have a student who's calling out, you may not look at them directly, but say to the class, remember, if you have something you want to say, you need to raise your hand. And then if the student immediately raises their hand, you're going to be like, thank you so much for raising your hand. What is it that you were saying? And I even tell students the purpose in turn taking is so that I can make sure that I am listening to you and taking in what you are saying. And if someone is interrupting someone else or talking over someone else, I don't know to listen to what you're saying, and I can't hear it and respond. So a lot of times giving them that purpose, like, oh, this is why I need to raise my hand. This is why I need to wait. And then making sure you provide that praise and direct attention when they do is really helpful. And just making sure that if possible, you don't provide it when they interrupt. All of those things can help. That's
Awesome
a lot.
tips. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I made a list of that, and definitely that's what I wanted. Yeah, so it's like we are familiar with that kind of, throwing the ball to the student. And this one is actually now works in a different way. So you give the right to the student to talk. So it's like a rule for them, not just, like an interesting thing to implement. Very good. Thank you. That's, I'm amazed. So that's incredible. Yeah. And yeah, we have the comments from the chat box. So the idea with some items is great. So definitely we appreciate the tips you've shared with us. So can the teacher use the native language more with an ADHD student, or would that be too distracting and confusing? So like the native to English language balance, like what can you tell us about that?
That honestly, that is something I'm going to think about it for a moment, because I don't know if I've actually read any research. And I do think, I will say, shifting back and forth between languages, I think would potentially be distracting. If, however, that shift into a different language was a cue to the student with ADHD that you had taught them. If I shift into this language, that is a cue for you to listen, that could serve as an auditory cue for the student. I would just make sure that whenever you are shifting, that it would be purposeful and that the student with ADHD knows when and why you are shifting, if that helps. I think if you're constantly shifting, I shouldn't say constantly, but if you shift back and forth randomly, again, if that's helpful for students in whatever class you're in, I don't want you to I wouldn't necessarily dissuade you from it, but I think a student with ADHD, if you're very purposeful in when you shift and they understand why, then I think that can help. I think you could actually use it to your benefit potentially.
Awesome. Thank you. Hope, Elena, that we answered the question, like we answered to the question, so you got the reply. Thank you, Elena, for the question, and thank you, Erica, for the prompt, for the idea. So yeah, definitely. Again, so many options, so many variables, because each learning environment is so different, and each child is so different. Any other questions? Or we are going to say a huge thank you one more time to Erica for being with us this evening. Yes, we still have one more question.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, because I've got the chat up. I'm sorry, I can see the question.
Yeah, so keep reading, yeah.
Okay.
Or should I read it? Like, I just didn't.
Oh, no, I can see it. Absolutely. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So This is, I will say, I would focus on, this is difficult because this is very individual. So I think with that student, I would prioritize specific skill areas. One of the things that I tell people, especially if you're working with a student that isn't using vocal verbal behavior, I would really focus on ensuring that they have some form of communication, because it's very important for students to be able to express their wants and needs. Very important. A lot of times when students are not able to do that, they will exhibit challenging behaviors in order to show that they want to access or avoid something. So one of the things that I would focus on pretty early is establishing some form of communication system, even if it's a picture exchange, pointing to words on a piece of paper if they're able to read, which they may not be able to, but starting to teach them to communicate. And I can send you, if you would like to email me, I can send you resources on ways to teach a specific communication system if they don't have one, that uses pictures and exchanging of pictures to help them communicate with you. So first, I would definitely focus on establishing a communication system if one isn't present. And then I would identify what are the skills that the student does have and what are the skills I need to target. Because honestly, playing with the student can help you work on many, many skills with that student, even getting them to sit at a table with you and engage in play.
Я пішла.
Oh,
Я виключила, закрила.
Even if you can get them. Oh, yeah, no, it's okay. I didn't know if it was the person who asked the question. I'm sorry. So even if getting them to sit at a table with you for a sustained period of time and play, that may be the skill that you target, and then you gradually introduce academic instruction into that play. And so I think I would focus in on what specific skills does your student have and what specific basic skills do you need for them to be able to engage in learning. So this, I almost feel like this is a more expansive conversation. And I do think there are quite a few things that I can suggest. So what I would like to propose is, if you can email me, we might be able to schedule a time that we can sit and sort of discuss what skills your student has currently, what type of communication they have, and then I can help you identify what you can start on and what you can target, and coming up with strategies. Because again, like I tell teachers, it may feel like you're not working on anything with them, but sometimes just sitting with them and engaging in activities, you are working on skills. You're working on social skills. You can work on turn taking. You can work on maintaining focus and attention. You can work on tolerance. There's so much you can work on just in sitting and engaging with a student. So if we can set up a time to talk separately, or if you want to do that via email or even setting up a time to meet, I think we can develop a more specific plan for your student that would help, I hope.
Thank you. That's just incredible. Yeah, definitely. So it's that situation when you think nothing is happening, but actually a lot is happening. So even if your student's not able to talk, but still you're developing those skills that could be really important in future. And yeah, that's just, and in future, I think, so that's going to change. And in addition, so thank you so much for offering and being ready to contribute to our society of teachers who are working with those students, because definitely we are on the process to that, because it's relatively, I would say, new, because in our schools we've started, like we've been doing that for years already, but it's still in the progress. So we're learning how to do that. So that's why we have this course. That's why we have the professionals like Erica here, and we do appreciate that so much. So thank you one more time. And yes, that's very nice of you to offer us to contact you just in case we need some extra. And definitely, I would just ask you, Erica, to include the link to those things you mentioned, like the communication system with pictures for students with ASD?
Yeah.
Because I've just seen that on a video, like a student was just clicking yes or no. So that was already a progress, like on a tablet. So I believe that's the same action. Well, I mean, that's in that direction. So we're talking,
Yes.
we're looking in the same direction. Cool. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much. Thank you so much again for being here.
Yeah,
and yeah, I'm going to
course.
send you a thank you email and express all of my ideas and thoughts for that, because now it's like too overwhelming for me. And yeah, we're still going to have a couple of minutes with our participants. And if there's any comment here or any thank you words or any like questions, like short questions, so anybody, you're welcome to talk.
So I will say just really quickly, I typed
Mhm.
picture exchange communication system into the chat. That is
Cool.
the system that if you go online, you should be able to find
Awesome.
videos and resources that will talk about how to establish that type of system. There is also online training that is offered. So if you really, so again, I'm sorry, I just wanted to explain what that was that I put in there.
Mhm. That's cool. Yeah, sorry. You can keep going. I'm sorry. I don't know if it would be, sorry.
Oh, no,
Maybe I
you're good. I
interrupted.
was just going to say I didn't
Oh,
know if anyone had any questions, but yes, that's the system I was talking about that you can use to establish communication, where an individual has pictures that they learn to exchange to access certain items, and you can use that to help establish a communication system for students.
incredible. Great. Thank you so much one more time. All right, cool. So now we can let you go. And that is so much. We appreciate it so much. Thank you again. So it was Erica McClure. Thank you. Thank you one more time.
Thank you. And again, please reach out if there's any more information you would like. I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
Thank you.
I know there is some talk, hopefully in the future, of actually having us come to Ukraine
Awesome.
to meet all of you and help support you as well. So hopefully that can happen. We'll actually be able to meet in person. So
Incredible. Looking forward to meeting you
great.
here in Ukraine. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, cool. I think that was really great. And still, yeah, that was like, we still have some things to do. So let's do it very quickly. I believe now once you've got all that information, and we can just jump right into those activities. So actually the task is going to be very similar to what we did last time, but we just have very little time this time. You want to share your activities. So again, activities for students with ADHD and ASD. So in your breakout rooms for just, I would say 10 minutes, just share the ideas of your activities. So put them down in the table, just very short things. And then later you can link or attach your files like we did last time. So if you have any interesting presentations or any interesting, I don't know, lesson plans that you developed or created, that would be great if you can share them in those notes. So the task is you want to share your activities or ideas about the activities in the breakout rooms. Share as many as you can. If it's just 2 activities, it's fine. If it's 8 activities, perfect. So as much as you can within 8 minutes. Any questions on the task? I'm sharing the link to it. Yeah, I know we're tired. It's like evening and almost the end of the week, but still we can do that. So here's the link. You may add it. You may also share your screens. That's very nice. And breakout rooms, we're going to have still people joining. We're going to have, let it be 4 breakout rooms and 10 minutes for that. Okay, so let's start. If any questions, just let me know. I'm going to send the link to the file in the Telegram group too. All right, cool. So nevertheless, we still have some time. Yeah, so you got the information here, and anybody, any group, let's just pick up a couple of activities and describe how you would apply them within your class, within your learning environment, and with your students. And why did you choose that exercise? Why do you think it would work? And how would you adapt that exercise? Anyone? Any volunteer? Olga, so your mic is on. Looks like you are ready. Sorry, but your video is on, so next time you should switch it off, and I will know you're not available. So thank you so much for being ready.
I don't switch videos unless I'm
That's
somewhere else, because I know
cool.
that feeling, Ivan. I'm
Appreciate,
also
yeah,
teacher.
definitely, yeah.
I know
So
that
we
feeling
know
when
that.
you have no one. Yeah, okay, quickly. So
Cool.
I was in a group. I was in a group 4, and yeah, we came up with different activities, but actually we took them from the book. They're pretty nice. So everyone agreed. First of all, I will tell upon which everyone agreed. It was Simon Says for listening, and it's pretty easy, and I guess goes well with everyone. For speaking, we picked a speaking dice. It's like you have dice with either numbers, different numbers or different colors, and when you roll them, so you have to answer specific questions. I'm not sure how, like, you can adapt, but you have to think how you could adapt it, because I don't think it can be, let's say, special needs friendly all the time, but the adaptation works well. Yeah. So for writing, I really like the idea suggested by my colleagues with the comic strip creation, and that's something that I do with my students, like all the time, and they love it. So basically what you have to do, you have to kind of create a small story or a dialogue, and you have to put it in pictures and create like a comic strip, which is, but again, I don't know, you have to think how to put the instructions so that they go well with the special education, with the, like, inclusivity in general.
Sorry, I just thought about that. Recently, I stumbled upon a video where there was a dice used again, but I don't remember exactly what kind of activity that was. But it seemed to me very simple. Like you can use like with very low level students. So definitely you can think of that. And I'll try to find that. And once I find that, I'll share it in the chat.
For sure. You can, if talking about levels, that's something you can adapt. But that's what I was thinking about SEN kids. You know, because for them it might be anxiety inducing to wait for a turn and thinking, oh, he has this color and I wanted that color, and you know, this
sense.
When there is an element of comparison, to me it's already the potential threat, I would say.
Possible, definitely. So you want to keep that in mind. Make sure, you know your student, so you know that activity is not going to work. So is going to be, or she's going to be excited about that, and definitely you want to avoid that. Again, there's nothing like there's no one size fits all. So you want to specify and make that you know the diversion. Good. Yeah. Any other comments? Thank you, Olga.
I want.
Yes, Svetlana.
Okay.
You're welcome.
We had the similar activities with group number 4, so I would just add something new, maybe. Firstly, about the writing activities for ADHD, which was nature walk acrostic poem. I don't know it will be good or not, but it will be so interesting as for me to find in your memory a correct word for this letter. For speaking, I choose I Spy. Really, for English lessons, I found this game for the first time, and I think it's very interesting, not just for ADHD, ADHD, but for all students. In the primary school, 100%. Okay, and listening. Oh, it's not for it's for
so what group were you? Is this your group?
Number 1.
Like number 1.
Number
okay, so I'm just gonna show
I had 2 variants of plans. Just all of variants of activities for students for ADHD, and another one for ASD. And now I tell you about the ASD, because for ADHD we wrote in our table. So
great.
I Spy is for speaking, and it's very challenging activity for listening. It's a game. Can you copy what you I can't read, just a moment. Can you copy what you can't see? It's a drawing game. I had the instruction for this activity. I don't know, it if it will be correct for the ASD, because I discussed with a teacher. We have the ASD in a primary school. It's not my class, it's not my student. So I decided to discuss with their teacher, and she said that it will be good for the students. A little bit about the rules. I should to write the picture, and then I should to tell to students what they should to draw step by step, and then we should to compare our pictures, and after listening, if it can be like listening with our students. And maybe that's all, because for ADHD I have Simon Says too. For speaking activities, it's speaking dice too, but in like in board game, and a comic trip, and that's all.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Svetlana. Yeah, very good. So it's 6 p.m. I'm not going to keep you any longer here. So I suggest you download or I don't know, somehow attach the link if you are ready to share your developments, your lesson plans. So Svetlana, for example, if you're ready to share it with the group, we would really appreciate that. So at least some of the activities, maybe, if not all of them. So again, we want to, because our final goal is to have some set of activities when we finish this course. So if you are ready, if you're willing to cooperate and to do that, to share, so just forget the words. If you're ready to share, so please do that in this file, because you will have access to it and you will be able to just, you know, look through the activities and see, okay, maybe that's going to work for me, and just apply some of them. So that is going to be kind of your homework, just to share your activities, since we had not too much time for that. And yeah, at this point, I believe we can finish and have a great evening. And thank you so much for being with us today. Hopefully this presentation by Erica was informative. It was nice for everybody of us. And thank you for sharing your activities. Thank you for doing some extra stuff for your development, for being ready to learn, to grow, and most important, to share. So this is really inspiring to me, and hopefully to each of us. And yeah, what's important to your students, because they're going to see the results of your work. Thank you so much again, and hope to see you next week. So bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.